Story 1. Assistant kitchen manager demonstrated safe and correct mandolin handling techniques on my first day. Assistant kitchen manager sliced the tip of their thumb off during the lesson. Returned from the emergency room about 2.5 hours later to finish the shift like a boss. Story 2. I worked at a high-end luxury ski resort. We had a program where young adults would fly in from other countries to learn and get experience on how to run a hotel or a specific part of the hotel. Great idea, but since the parents had to pay to fly them to our remote resort ski town, it was just a bunch of lazy rich kids. I worked in the kitchen. One girl decided she didn't want to work that day and came up with a genius plan. She would wrap her arm in plastic wrap to protect it and quickly dip her arm into the fryer to melt the plastic wrap. And she would get sent home for a couple of days to recover, also known as shop and ski. Yeah, it did not go according to plan. The plastic melted onto her skin. I can't remember how long she was in the hospital, but she needed a skin graft and went home afterwards. The grossest story was when I worked in a shady part of town. A restaurant down the street from us got shut down because they found a rat trapped in the frying oil that had been there for a while. They last changed the oil 2 months prior. Story 3. Someone attempted to stick their hands into an 80-quart Hobart floor mixer before it stopped moving and got their arm twisted around a couple of times, causing multiple breaks. Sickening. Story 4. As an 18-year-old assembly chef, I had to tackle my pancake cook before he dumped a 5-gallon barrel of water on a grease fire I asked him to take care of because I was 8 tickets deep. Story 5. Calling me a chef is steep, but on my first day on the job at McDonald's, I get a warning on the fryer checkbox when I am about to filter the oil. For context, filtering involves pumping the oil through a box with 2 sieves. I have no idea what it means, so I ask my crew trainer, who says, "It'll be fine. It usually warns you a few filters before you have to do anything. Just filter it." Next thing I know, boiling oil is flowing out of the bottom of the machine and flooding into the manager's office. Something in the box had clogged, and the oil from the last filter hadn't drained. I don't know how neither of us got fired, but I worked there for 2.5 years after that and never spilled a drop of oil again. Story 6. Not a chef, but I worked as a server. The kitchen manager decided to use some very heavy-duty drain cleaner on one of our floor drains. Somehow it backed up and spilled out without anyone knowing. The first to enter that part of the kitchen was one of our younger servers, probably about 16 or 17. She slipped and fell on the chemicals. Almost immediately, she knew something was wrong, but our manager was difficult, so she kept working through the irritation. Within 30 minutes, she ran out and went to the bathroom. Our head chef noticed she was gone for more than 10 minutes and went to the bathroom to check on her. Instead, she found her crying her eyes out with some extremely painful chemical burns on her back and legs. They rushed her to the hospital. It was the only time in 10 years that the kitchen fully shut down. She got a big payout because it permanently scarred her, but none of us stayed there very long. Story 7. Back in the 80s, commercial plastic wrap came with a very sharp serrated cutting edge. One cook, let's call her Jane, was wrapping something when the box of plastic wrap started to fall off the prep table. She tried to catch it with her free hand. She grabbed it by the cutting edge, and it slipped through her palm like a bandsaw. There was a lot of blood, and her palm was split open to the bone. It looked like her palm had degloved. That was the last time I saw or heard from Jane. Story 8. I was not a chef but a manager at Kentucky Fried Chicken in the late 1990s. One of the upright warmers wasn't working, and they had the old-school long tube fuses. We were closed and cleaning the floors, so standing in an inch of soapy water, I opened the fuse port. The fuse did not pop out, as if the inner spring was broken. I stuck my finger in and tapped the fuse to bump it out while it was still plugged in, not thinking, and it shocked me so badly that it knocked me onto the floor of soapy water. I could feel it in my fillings, and after I came to, my teeth and jaw were what hurt the worst. Story 9. My friend is a bartender at a mid to high-end place. They had a person cleaning the vents over the deep fryers, standing on a baking sheet propped over the grease. The sheet slipped, and his foot went into the deep fryer. He suffered third-degree burns or more up his whole foot and part of the leg. I asked how the place wasn't sued into the ground. The worker was undocumented, and it never got reported. He was just sent to the emergency room and didn't report the restaurant because his brothers still worked there. Story 10. Not a chef, but I slipped while washing a vegetable peeler and peeled my thumbnail halfway off. It got caught in the bed of my nail, and backing the blade out through the torn nail still gives me chills. Story 11. Restaurant owner here. Hired someone who had 5 years experience running a fryer and flat top. Asked him if he's cleaned a fryer before, and he laughed a bit and said of course he has. This person reached down into the fryer with oil still in and burnt his hand severely. When I asked him why he thought he wouldn't get burnt, he told me, "The stupid thing has been turned off for almost 5 minutes." He put in his 2 weeks notice a month later and gave my spot a 1-star review on Google. Story 12. My buddy tossed me a lighter as I was standing next to the deep fryer. I must have had a hole in my hand that day because it sailed straight into the fryer. Luckily, I threw a baking sheet on top of the fryer to contain the imminent explosion. Story 13. I saw a cocaine user slice his index finger from the tip to the second knuckle, moving a bread knife through grinders as fast as he could. I watched a not very bright person clean the handle of his knife while his thumb was on the blade. He flung the knife upwards when he was done, splitting his thumb down the middle and sending a trail of blood up the wall and onto the 12-foot-high ceiling. Not an accident per se, but I caught my dishwasher siphoning the grease trap down the drain. He started the siphon by sucking on it. Story 14. It was myself. Around 7 or 8 years ago, I was on the line when somebody knocked an aerosol can of Vaseline into the fryer, and nobody noticed. For about 5 minutes, the can heated up until it exploded, sending around 5 gallons of 350-degree oil into the air and then down onto me. After 2 months in the hospital and 10 hours of skin graft surgery, I finally got to go home from that shift. Story 15. In high school, I worked at the fancy restaurant in my small community of 5,000 people. It was a Swiss restaurant that did wine and fondue and the such. Anyways, our line cook was an experienced chef from Dallas. I have no idea how he ended up in the middle of nowhere with the rest of us. This dude liked downers. Really liked downers. He would take Xanax, hydrocodone, oxycodone, and then chase them with Adderall so he could have downers and keep working. I guess one day he didn't chase his downer with an upper. It was a busy night in the kitchen, and I was at the food prep station near the grill. I turned around with a tub of onions just in time to watch him fall forward onto the flame grill, which was loaded up with searing mignons. He didn't even react. Just laid on the grill. Anyways, lots of screaming and a 911 call later, the guy was taken to the closest burn unit, about an hour away. 2nd and 3rd degree burns on most of his chest and face, ended up being intubated in the burn unit for a few days. He never came back after that. I wonder how he is doing. Story 16. When I was 16, I was working in the back of a Pizza Hut preparing a hot ham sandwich for the oven. I grabbed the hoagie bun, cut it quickly with the knife, questioned why this bread was red, tossed it in the trash, and checked the rest of the bag to see what spilled on it when I realized the floor around me was red too. It turned out that cutting bread while holding it is a very foolish move. I said, "Well, damn," and my manager turned to get mad at me for cursing at work. When she saw my hand bleeding on the ground, she handed me a towel and told me I could go ahead and go home to get it cleaned up. I should have gotten stitches because it was deep, but I was poor, so I just super glued it and wrapped it in gauze. Oh well, you can't even tell now, almost 2 decades later. Story 17. I witnessed a chef attempt to open a large can with a chef's knife. He angled the blade towards himself and hit the handle of the knife with his palm. The blade didn't penetrate the can and instead ricocheted off the top. He drove the blade into his stomach deep enough that it was hanging out without him touching it. The manager told him he would be drug tested if he told the doctor he was at work when the accident happened. The cook pulled the knife out of his stomach and drove himself to the emergency room. He didn't die and he kept his job, but the amount of pain he went through was significant just because he smoked weed and a corporate restaurant wasn't okay with that. Story 18. Not a chef but one caused it. I was burned by a poached egg. I was in the dish pit after a long brunch shift. I made a wise remark to the chef, and he grabbed a leftover poached egg that he thought was cold. It was not, and he was a much better shot than I thought. It hurt, but I did get a cold beer to help recover. We were all good. The owner set a new rule. No throwing food in the kitchen. Story 19. One day, while changing fryers, I accidentally poured hot oil on my hand, giving me second-degree burns. I left and went home instead of going to the hospital because of that $5,000 bill. I bought a 24-pack of beer and anesthetized myself. The next day, the skin on top of my hand peeled off, but I had no pain at all, like none. So the moral of the story is if you get a really bad burn, just get really wasted, and you won't have any pain the next day. This is the way of line cooks worldwide. Story 20. Actual chef here. Let's run down 38 years of foolish incidents. 1993. Resident idiots decided that an oil and water slip and slide down the entire line was a great way to pass a slow shift. Resulted in 1 broken ankle and 1 hyperextended wrist. Also 1993. A stingy kitchen manager would stash bags of towels in the drop ceiling. Ended up dropping the entire ceiling while crawling into it to grab a bag of towels. 1996. A sous chef convinced himself that using the safety pusher on the automatic potato chip slicer was inefficient. Ended up shaving about 2 millimeters off the top of his uppermost knuckles. 1999. Prep cooks removed the safety magnets on the Hobart mixer so they could bypass the safety cage. One prep cook slipped, and his arm went into the mixing bowl while it was turning a 40-pound batch of pizza dough, crushing his entire forearm. Unfortunately, the company managed to pressure his immigrant parents into an unfair settlement. 2002. Bartenders were throwing excess broken glassware and bottles into their normal trash instead of recycling buckets. A barback was cut deeply by broken glass while taking out the trash. 2006. Cooks would stand on the divider bar between fryers to wipe down the exhaust hoods, despite multiple warnings. One night, one of them had his foot and leg drop into an active fryer. 2008. A bar manager, while trying to change a keg, got frustrated and gave the tapping mechanism a hard turn, breaking the top off the keg and showering the bar with beer. 2009. I overestimated the amount of product you can store on the top shelf of a Metro rack. The support clasps broke, and I ended up covered in 20 quarts of cocktail sauce. Let me tell you, cocktail sauce does not feel good on the skin. 2012. A cheap owner thought he could fix everything himself using the internet for instructions. Lost his eyebrows and half his goatee while attempting to fix a high-limit switch on a gas convection oven. 2015. A line cook thought the self-clean function on our Henny Penny combi oven would be perfect for cleaning his glass bongs. They all exploded inside the oven during the cycle. The repair cost was almost $15,000. 2023. For all mandolin lovers and haters, a prep cook wanted to dice apples into perfect 3/8-inch cubes. He opened the mandolin all the way and tried to jam the apple through it, nearly cutting through his thumb bone. There are many more stories, but this should suffice for now. Story 21. A pan set on fire. The chef heroically jumped to the rescue, turned off the extractor fan, picked up the pan of flaming oil, and ran through the kitchen and out the back door with it. Burns covered his arm. To this day, he shares the details of the story with comments like, "Everyone else was panicking and didn't know what to do. This was just profoundly foolish." A pan catching fire is relatively common and not cause for panic. No one was panicking, no one was even remotely fazed. It's just such a non-issue. If a pan catches on fire, turn off the heat and put a lid on it. If, God forbid, the fire somehow leaves the pan, turn off the heat and use a fire blanket. Doing nothing will eventually let it burn itself out. He just saw the fire and overreacted. He could have splashed flaming oil on someone or on himself or slipped or anything similar. The absolute last thing he or anyone else should do is pick the pan up. Not to mention, his first instinct was to turn off the electricity, not the gas. So there was no ventilation, but still a flame on the stove. He got reprimanded for it, but it just went in one ear and out the other. Just an absolute moment of recklessness. Story 22. So I was a beer delivery driver. I delivered draft beer. I was at a Longhorn Steakhouse, and the morning prep guys were chopping up lettuce for the day's salads. For whatever reason, One of them didn't have the standard cut-proof gloves on and was in a rush. Well, his little finger became part of the salad. Story 23. I watched our new chef slam a food order ticket into the metal ticket stabber. It went through the meaty part of his hand. He grabbed a rag and was never seen again. Story 24. Went for drinks with the head chef, got drunk. He didn't work the next day, and I had a massive hangover. The sous chef asked me to cut some apples. I can't even remember for what. I cut the tip of my left pinky, all the tip. It almost grew back again. I just have a little circle with no sensitivity, but it looks all right. I never went drinking that hard or at all if I had to work the next day. Never ever again hangover. It became a rule of life. Story 25. I'm not a chef, but I worked in a kitchen at a fast casual restaurant when I was 18 or 19. During a lunch rush, while working the grill, I accidentally set the plastic bottle of oil on the stove instead of on the shelf next to it. The bottom of the bottle melted off, and a large amount of oil spilled onto the grill, leading to flames a couple of feet high. I managed to put it out quickly, but it gave me and everyone else an absolute heart attack.